Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Scott Lewis, Director of Emergency Management, and welcome to the Hazard Mitigation Plan update. Before we begin the meeting, we're going to ask Patrick to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would stand and remove your caps, please. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Patel. So again, this is Scott Lewis. Welcome to Nye County Hazard Mitigation Plan update. This is a very important plan for the entire county. And before we commence with our key speaker today, who will be leading our discussion, I'm going to ask Patrick to conduct a roll call for those that are on the telephone. Patrick?
Okay, this is Patrick Lasme from Nye County Emergency Management. Can everybody out there on phone and Zoom land hear me?
Yes, Patrick. This is Ron Boscovich.
Thank you, Commissioner Boscovich. This is going to be a little bit tricky because I don't have access to my computer yet, but I want to find out who we have on the phone. So if I can get you kind of politely one by one just to tell me your name and who you're representing.
Perry Forsyth, Beatty Town Advisory Board.
Thank you, Perry.
Erica Gerling, Beatty Town Advisory Board.
Thank you, Erica.
Dan Burke, National
Bruce
Weather Service.
Jensen.
Thank you, Dan. I got yours. Bruce Jensen, I got yours.
Cheryl Nagy, Clark County Office of Emergency Management.
Thank you, Carol.
Nicole Silberschlag, Town of Round Mountain.
Jeb Rowley, Eureka County Public Works, Emergency Management. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Arnold Knightley, Public Information Officer, Nye County.
Thank you, Arnold.
Marion Perez, Decorator Shoshone Tribe.
Thank you, Marion. Good to hear from you.
Robin Hebrock, Pahrump Valley County.
Robin, could you spell your last name for me?
That's H-E-B as in boy, R-O-C-K.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Tabitha Hamilton with White Pine County Emergency Management.
Thank you, Tabitha.
Did you already get Nicole? I didn't hear you say gotcha.
Nicole Silberstrog?
Yep.
Did I say that even close to right?
Yep.
I got it. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
I just entered the meeting, Carolyn Drayton, Currant Creek.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Is there anyone else that's on the telephone that we have missed? Okay, hearing none, we have a handful of individuals within the room, and they have also signed in. And I believe our presentation is now available. Great. So today I have the honor of introducing Matt Iyer, and Matt has been in the emergency management industry for the past 20 years. Over his time, he has worked on planning and exercise projects with state, county, local, and tribal entities. He comes to us from the great state of Colorado, and Matt will be leading our discussion today on this plan. And so we enjoy his presentation will be great, but also the most important part is to receive your feedback on what you think some of the most important issues are within the county. And therefore we can formulate a best practice plan to ensure that we're covered for just about anything that we need to consider with the appropriate remedy. Matt?
I'm gonna get one of these. Real careful with that. Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Iyer, and we're here today to talk about hazard mitigation planning, natural hazard mitigation planning for Nye County. And what we're going to do is we're going to update your existing plan. You have a plan that was written in 2013, and we are going to take a stab at updating that so that it reflects current conditions, current hazards, current knowledge, so that you have an updated plan. I should tell you that I run a very, very loose discussion and training meeting. And by that, I mean, if at any juncture you have any questions, comments, concerns, you'd like to talk more about something, or probably more appropriately, you want me to talk less about something, please don't hesitate to let me know. You're not going to hurt my feelings because my wife will tell you I don't have any. So we're going to dive into a PowerPoint presentation and we're going to talk about why we're doing the plan. We're going to talk about how we're doing the plan. And we're going to talk about some of the elements in the plan. And it's really the elements in the plan that I'd like your feedback from. So without further ado, we're going to kick off through the PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully. We've already done our introductions, so we can skip right over that. And we can get into the review of hazard mitigation planning. More importantly, why we're doing it and what the requirements are for it. So let's talk about hazard mitigation planning and what it is. And this is the definition of hazard mitigation planning. It's sustained action to reduce or eliminate long-term risk to the people and property from natural hazards and their effects. So what we're thinking about is this: if someone were to hand the community a bag of money and say, go make things safer for your community, how would you do that? What hazards would you mitigate against? And what long-term solutions would you provide to make everybody and everything safer? That's what we're doing with hazard mitigation planning. Now, why are we doing that? It provides you with a plan, your communities, all of your communities within the county, a plan and a roadmap to aid in the creation and revision of policies. So we want to look at the hazards that can impact us and think about how we can change policies and procedures to make us safer. We want to talk about the use of available resources. Again, we all know that we have finite resources. If we are going to use them to make things safer, how do we most effectively do that? And we want to provide long-term tangible benefits to the community. We want to show that we're making things safer. We want people to know how we're making things safer. How can hazard mitigation planning help? Oh, yes, got a question.
This is Evan with Nye County IT again. Any of those, especially on phones, if you could please mute unless you are commenting. We're getting some feedback from some of you who are not muted.
No worries at all. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that, especially for those of you calling in on the phone or maybe on the road or doing work. I appreciate you being here. So how can hazard mitigation planning help? Well, we can build a safer future for all the citizens, and that's important. When I think of doing hazard mitigation planning, I think of doing it for the kids. And I always look through the lens of, I got 2 little kids. How can I make things safer for them? And that's always the approach I take with hazard mitigation planning. If I can make things better for my children and safer for my children, we're making things better and safer for the whole community. I want to foster cooperation and planning resiliency. Hazards don't have the good grace to respect political boundaries. And that's why we have a lot of the emergency managers from adjacent counties on the line as well, because we all work and we all pull together. And the stronger we are, the better our response and recovery capabilities can be. We want to identify and prioritize actions against the hazards. Now, that's one of the big things about this plan. What we do is we identify the potential hazards, and then we say, what actions can we take to mitigate and make things safer against them? Each participating community will come up with their own actions that says, here's how we would like to make things safer. And that's really the whole thrust of this plan. Once you have an approved hazard mitigation plan, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes, you have the capability to apply for federal funding through a whole bunch of funding streams to get money to do the projects that you identify. How can hazard mitigation help monetarily? This is what I was just talking about, right? So there's 2 big streams of funding that can really help if you have an approved hazard mitigation. The first one is the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And that kicks into effect after a federally declared disaster has occurred in the state. Once that occurs, we sequester a portion of the full amount of money into the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And if you have an approved hazard mitigation plan, you can apply for grant funding under this program. Now, there's also a new bigger program in place, and that's called Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, BRIC. BRIC has a lot of money available. For 2022, there was $2.3 billion available for funding. And out of that $2.3 billion, each state gets a portion, a guaranteed portion of that. And again, if you have a hazard mitigation plan, you can apply for grant funding under that program. But aside from the guaranteed portion, there is a huge pot of national money available. Now, it is a competition for this, right? Everybody's going for that money. But again, if you have an approved hazard mitigation plan, you can apply for this grant funding. There are all sorts of other grant programs that if you have a hazard mitigation plan, it increases your chances of getting grant funding as well. Now, I do want to say this. There's always a catch with this, right? There's always a catch. And the catch is simply this. For each one of these grant programs, the community has to come up with a 25% match. If you say, I'm going to do $1 million project, you as the community have to come up with $250,000 of that funding. Now, that always gives people pause. People always say, hey, you know what? How are we as a community going to come up with $250,000? And I tell them, you don't have to come up with cash. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, puts a dollar metric on everything. And so if you can do in-kind donations, and by that, I mean, you have an engineering staff or a design staff, so you can design the project. If you have heavy equipment that you can use to construct the project, if you have volunteer hours that can help you, you can knock down a huge portion of that required match almost down to nothing. In fact, I was working on a project in the state of Kansas where they were doing a shelter for a school, for a technical college. They had $0 match because they used their students, their equipment, their professors to design, construct, and build the school. They didn't have to pay a nickel out of pocket to build that safe room, and everything else they need, they got from these grant fundings. So again, I want to encourage you that when you have that hazard mitigation plan, it really does open up a lot of funding streams for you. Okay, let's talk about what I need from you, and this is the first step of what I need from you. We need a hazard mitigation planning committee. We would like a representative from each participating jurisdiction to be on the committee. And I'm going to ask you to do some stuff as part of that committee. The first thing is attend meetings with us, right? We don't have a lot of meetings for this, but we will have some meetings and we'd like you to attend. You don't have to be in person. It can always be remote. We understand big county, sometimes you work in a one-horse town, and heck, if you're not there, who's guarding the horse? But we would like you to participate with those. We'd like you to help us with the collection of data, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But one of the things we're going to do is identify the hazards that can impact the communities. We have all sorts of capabilities to look and see what kind of hazards impact, but we have nowhere near the wealth of local knowledge that you do. And so one of the things we want to track from you is what happened? What knocked you down? What were the events that threw you off? Was it a flood? Was it an earthquake? What happened and how did it? We're going to ask you to review any of our planning elements and drafts. So we're going to come up with draft versions of the plan, and we're going to shop it out to you and say, hey, what the heck do you think about this? What can be better? What can be changed? When the time comes, we want you to assist with integrating this with your other planning efforts. That's one of the big things of hazard mitigation. It's a plan with the wealth of knowledge, and we want you to use that wealth of knowledge to update other plans, update other policies, update other procedures. So we want you to integrate. Now, we've got a lot of jurisdictions that we want to participate. We're hoping that, there we go. We're hoping that your name is there, your title is there, and your jurisdiction is there. That's what we're going to ask of you. And so if you'd like to participate on the Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee, please just let us know. Okay, let's talk about our goals and the steps for the project. So these are our 3 goals for hazard mitigation planning. The first one is to reduce the risk to people and property, right? We want to make things safer. The second one is work to protect vulnerable populations, structures, and critical facilities from the effects of hazard. So we want to take care of our vulnerable populations, and we also want to take care of our critical infrastructure, and that is usually our response and recovery infrastructure. And then finally, we want to improve public outreach initiatives. The more we can get the public involved in hazard mitigation planning, the safer we are as a community. If the public understands what the hazards are that can impact them, and more importantly, how they can mitigate against it, as a community, we are much, much safer. Here's the steps that we're going to take to complete the plan. We're going to review your old plan. We're going to review all the current planning documents that we can get our hands on, whether that be master plans, whether that be building codes, whether that be policies and procedures. We're going to review all that we can get our hands. We're going to deliver our planning meetings. We are going to solicit public input. So one of the things we recognize is that, hey, not everybody can attend meetings like this, right? It's just, whether they're working or whether they are remote, whatever it may be, we can't get the attendance we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to stand up an online survey that anybody anywhere can fill out. It's going to be a series of questions, very brief survey, but it's a series of questions about hazard mitigation planning so that we can get a wide swath of the community to fill out and give us feedback. We're then going to assess your potential risks. We're going to assess your vulnerabilities and assets. We are going to review and develop mitigation actions. And then we're going to develop that draft plan and give it to you to review. Okay. Each jurisdiction. So participating jurisdictions, and by that we mean standalone entities, whether it be a city, whether it be a county, whether it be a co-located county and city. We need this for you to be considered participating in the plan. Attend the meetings, provide information, review your mitigation action items when the time comes, provide feedback on the plan, and then most important, formally adopt the plan. We don't want to go through all these steps, come through all these hoops, and then have your jurisdiction not adopt the plan. Now that becomes a little bit challenging, especially if you don't have necessarily a governing body, right? If you don't have someone to adopt the plan for some of our smaller jurisdictions, that's okay because you're considered participating underneath the county. And so when the county signs and adopts the plan, you are considered adopting as well. So if you don't have that governing board that can pass a proclamation or do a resolution to pass this, that's okay. We're not leaving you behind. I guarantee that. Okay. The National Risk Index for Nye County. FEMA, again, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has put together a lot of data because there's a lot of data out there on what kind of risks we face. And so we took a look at that for Nye County. This is part of our initial research. And this is what the risk index is composed of. It's composed of data that gives you your expected annual loss. So if we look at a particular hazard, let's say earthquake, FEMA has taken a lot of data, crunched it together, and said, what can Nye County expect for annual losses due to earthquake? And then they looked at your social vulnerability score. This is what kind of vulnerabilities you have as a county, how robust you are, and what are your vulnerabilities. And then they looked at your resiliency, how prepared, how ready you are, how cohesive you are. And they give us what we call the risk index. And we look at that through the lens of Nye County. Now, we don't rely on this solely when we were looking at the risk to Nye County, but it is one of the many elements that we look at. And so let's take a look at some of the information for that. This is the social vulnerability for Nye County. So you'll see that it's relatively high. So they look at Nye County and they say, with the data, you know what, you guys are a little bit vulnerable. You don't have the robust infrastructure necessarily to respond to and recover from a hazard event. And I think that is kind of true. And it's not a knock against you. It's because you have, very big spaces of not a lot of people, not a lot of anything, and very small communities that maybe don't have the full robust response capability that they need. Big distances, small communities, that equals a little bit of response problem. So they give you a relatively high social vulnerability. Yes, sir. Yeah, no, I mean, That's a great point, and that is that you do, so Nye County is most of the land in Nye County is managed and operated by the federal government. That's absolutely true. Um, whether they're going to give you the money to do what you want to do, that I don't know about. But we do recognize that there are a lot of federal sort of institutions here in Nye County. And we recognize that there's necessarily a split between them and you. One of the things we did is we invited a lot of those federal agencies to come to this meeting today so that we can foster that partnership and that resilience. Okay, let's take a look at your community resilience score. Again, this is how hardy you are, right? And you'll see here that you're very low on the community resilience score. And again, that is a function of your capabilities, really. It's not a knock against you. It's just recognizing that, again, big area, not a lot of people, not a lot of response capabilities. One hospital in the county? Is that about right? 2. It's questionable. I got some 2, I got some 1. We'll split the difference 1.5. What the heck? So again, right. So again, that speaks to your resiliency. Now, again, this is not a knock against you. This is just trying to reflect the lay of the land so that we have an understanding of what you as communities have and are able to do. It's not a knock. It's not a badge of dishonor or any of that kind of stuff. It's just a reflection of, hey, let's look at Nye County with clear eyes and say, if there was a major earthquake, what are their response capabilities? Do they have everything they need to be able to respond effectively and quickly? And the answer is maybe not, right? Especially because we're talking about such big distances to such small communities. Yes, sir. Yes. Yep. Yeah, it's a big distances, right?
Hi, Nicole on the phone. Can you guys repeat the questions? We can't hear what's being said.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, Nicole. My apologies there. We were talking about the community resiliency, and one of the discussions we were talking about was the number of hospitals. And so we've equated that we have 1 hospital in the county. And again, that speaks to your resilience. When we talk about resilience, we're talking about things like full-time fire departments, things like that. And I think that most of the fire departments in the communities are volunteer fire departments. So when we talk about resiliency, we're looking through the lens of that. Now, when we move on, we take a look at your risk index to all identified natural hazards. And this is what we come up with for Nye County, that you have a relatively moderate risk index to all 18 hazards. And we're going to talk about a lot of those hazards here coming up next. So again, they look at that. They look at the community resiliency. They look at the social vulnerability. They look at the expected annual losses. And this is where you come in, sort of middle of the pack on that moment. And what we're going to do now is we're going to actually take some time to look at, here's your expected annual losses. Now, the good news is that your expected annual losses to all of those hazards, all of those identified hazards, is very low. And again, that's because of the large distances. There's not a lot of, major metropolises or anything like that. And that's good, right? That's how we like to live. But again, if we have a major earthquake, there's not a heck of a lot to knock down. So what I want to do now is this. I want to talk about these hazards right here. Now, this is the risk index for all natural hazards for Nye County. And if we look at this, I want you to concentrate on the ones in red. The ones in red are from my research, and I am not the fount of all knowledge. So we're going to take impact and feedback from you on this, but the ones in red were the ones that, based on my research, are ones that can impact the county. The ones in orange, hail, lightning, and strong wind, we combine together under one hazard, and that is severe thunderstorm. When you have a thunderstorm, you usually get those 3 in conjunction. It's rare, not impossible, but rare that they occur all separate. You may get a lightning strike, but usually the lightning strike is because you got a thunderstorm in the air. You may get a hail, but hail's usually because you got a thunderstorm. So those 3 are combined together. You will notice that there's some that are not included. We look at coastal flooding. Well, you need a coast for that. So we're not going to include that in the plan. We look at winter weather or tsunami or volcanic activity. Again, those are ones that we're not writing about in the plan. But we're going to talk about these in detail coming up here. And one of the things that I'm going to ask of you is your feedback. It's okay to tell me you're wrong. Say, hey, Matt, we do have a concern about that. I'm going to show you the data as to why I think there's not a concern. But you guys know way better than I do on a local level as to why there may be a concern. And so this is the conversation part. So let's dive into them. And we're going to start off with the hazards that were identified. The first one is dam failure. Now, dam failure, you'll tell me with a straight face and completely true, is not a natural hazard. And I agree with you, right? It's not a natural hazard. However, FEMA does consider it a natural hazard. And you have, and we're going to talk about this, some concern about dam failure. We're going to talk about drought. I think that's pretty straightforward for us, right? We're going to talk about earthquake. We're going to talk about extreme heat. We're going to talk about flooding. We're going to talk about those severe thunderstorms, and we're going to talk about wildfire. So let's dive into as to why I think these should be included. So here's dam failure. For dam failure, you have two significant hazard dams identified within the county. Those two significant dams are up near Carver's, and they are the gold mining company, tailing, and runoff dam. They're considered significant hazards because the failure of the structure may damage isolated homes or highways or cause the temporary interruption of public utility services. Those two dams, I will show you on the map right here, are located right next to a highway. That's why they're considered significant hazard dams, because if they fail, it will absolutely impact that transportation utility or that transportation core. And so we want to include those in there. That dam is very unusual. One of those dams is very unusual because it has what's called an emergency action plan. High hazard dams within the state require an emergency action plan. And that is, what is the inundation area? If the dam breaks, it's going to flood and what it's going to do. That dam, I think it's the first one of them, has got an emergency action plan, which is very unusual for a significant hazard dam. And so we can take that information and map and see if the dam failures, what it's going to do. So that's kind of a nice and interesting piece of data. Okay, let's talk about drought. I think that we probably all understand why drought would be included as a natural hazard in this plan, right? It's dry. Now, this right here is a little bit of a complicated table, and it doesn't have to be, but this is from the Drought Monitor. The U.S. Drought Monitor monitors drought for the county and says, what category of drought are you in? And they do it on a weekly basis. And you'll see that the categories are down below there. We have D0, which is abnormally dry, all the way forward to D4, which is exceptional drought. And you will see there at the bottom table that you guys have been in a drought category 83% of the time. You've been at least abnormally dry 83% of the time over the past 10 years. Drought is a very big concern for you. And in fact, if we look at the map from this was last week, these are the drought conditions that you are currently in now. That's redundant. You're currently in those conditions. So again, drought is absolutely going to be included in this. This, and again, we spoke about this a few minutes ago, is the risk index that FEMA gives you for drought. And it's very interesting that it is that low. And the reason it is that low, my supposition is because of the agricultural base. Nye County doesn't have a big agricultural. And so because of that, that's the most, that is the part that is most impacted by drought, is agriculture, livestock, ranching, things like that. And Nye County just flat out doesn't have that big of an agricultural base. And so my guess is that that is why it's so low. If we look at expected annual losses, again, you'll see that that's very low as well. But that doesn't mean that that doesn't impact us as a community, right? If we start thinking about drought, we start thinking about running out of water for us. And that is a very big deal for us, right? We don't have the agricultural base, and that's okay. But we got the people. and people like drinking water. And so we want to look at drought as a very big hazard for us and think about actions that we can take to mitigate against. Why is earthquake included? So based on my initial research, these are the 4 big earthquakes that you've had over the past, 100 plus years, 1872 to present. You've had 2 7-point magnitude earthquakes here in the county, where the epicenter and the hypocenter. The hypocenter is the one below ground. The epicenter is where it is above ground in the county. The 5.6 ones I add in there, but 5.6 is going to sound dumb. Don't do as much damage, right? A 5.6 earthquake, you'd shake a little bit, you'd feel it, but it's not knocking down buildings in general. Magnitude 7 earthquake, though, that most assuredly is causing some damage. And so you have a history of earthquakes, and you've got some concerns. This is the USGS earthquake hazard classification map. And again, you're square in the middle there, but you will see there's some pockets of the county there that are indeed in the orange, which goes a little bit higher. You've got a lot of faults running through the county too. One of the things that we looked at was the fault map for Nye County. You've got a bunch of faults here that do have potential. This is an interesting one, and this is a long-term kind of thing, and what they're doing here is they're thinking in geologic time. This is the expected number of damaging earthquakes over the next 10,000 years. But again, when they're generating this, they're thinking in geologic time. And you can see there that you guys are expecting some. It's not 0. And the problem with earthquakes is not a lot of good ways to predict yet. So again, if we look over the next 10,000 years, there's nothing that says it couldn't be this afternoon, right? So we, again, are concerned about earthquakes. FEMA has a program called Hazard. And Hazard, again, is sort of like a big data pulling together system, right? FEMA can do some hazard information on earthquakes. And one of the things it can do is it can tell you the probability of an earthquake. Yeah, the probability of an earthquake on the Richter scale. So again, we're looking at the magnitude there from 5 to 7, keeping in mind that 5, 5.5, shaking, probably not a lot of catastrophic damage. But as we get higher, that damage does go up. It's orders of magnitude. The Richter scale is an interesting thing because you see 5 to 5.5 and you think, that's not a big jump. It's actually orders of magnitude. So again, you can see that we all have a percentage here of earthquakes occurring. Now, if we look at our risk index, you'll see that again, you have a relatively moderate risk of earthquakes. And if we look at the expected annual losses, you will see that again, you are going up there with a relatively low expected annual loss, but again, not 0. Let's talk about extreme heat. We're all familiar with this, right? Again, these are the regional high average temperatures in degree Fahrenheit. It gets hot in the summer, and we've got some pretty high temperatures. I'm doing this from memory, so, don't throw something at me if I'm wrong, but 125, I think, was the highest temperature that I saw recorded. Yeah, so it gets hot. We use a data table called the NCIE. It is a federal database of occurring events. And so we look at these data and we can look at the number of events over a time period for the county. If we use the NCIE and we look at excessive heat, you'll see that over the past 20 years, you've had at least 27 recorded extreme heat days, right? So you've got a history of this. And if we look at that and we do the math, now this isn't always great, but this gives us an idea of probability. If we look at the math and we say, hey, we've had 27 days of extreme heat, and that really should read events, I'm sorry, you're going to have an average event of 1 per year. At least once per year, you're pretty much a shoe-in to have an extreme heat event. And so we want to include that in for a hazard. Again, we see that we've got the risk here and it's starting to go to that kind of purple thing, and that's a little bit higher of a risk. Then we can look at expected annual losses, and again, that goes to a darker orange, and that's a little bit higher. So we want to include extreme heat. Flood. Flood's included because you gotta have flood. FEMA, no knock against them, is not going to let a plan go through that doesn't have flood identified as a hazard. That's just the way it is. But you guys do have flood risks. You can look it up here. Now we have 2 categories of flood. there is riverine flooding, and there is flash flooding. From what I know about the county, from my initial research, you guys aren't really worried about rivers flooding. There we go. Was it from the river flooding or was it a flash flood event? Okay. Yep. So that's a flash flood event. Good for you. Good for you. So we were talking about the difference between river. I'm sorry about the question there about the difference between flash flood and riverine flood. My knee-jerk reaction is that you as a county, we as a county, have got a very big risk to flash flood events as opposed to riverine flood events. And what we've done is we've classified these out and we've looked at the property damage caused by these. And again, you have a greater than 0 chance of flooding occurring, especially the flash flooding. Absolutely. And so we looked at this and we said, hey, what are the chances again of you having an event on a per yearly basis? This is riverine flood. Now, riverine flood, because it's its own category, is kind of unusual for you. And my knee-jerk reaction to this again is that they misclassified this. They said it was a riverine flood when it really was a flash flood event. But if we look at the flash flood events, you'll see that we've all had events. And we're all going to have events again. And there's things that we can do to mitigate against flooding, whether it's signage, whether it is elevating roadways, whether it's an education campaign. There's lots we can do to mitigate against those flood events. Now, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about flood events is the NFIP, which is the National Flood Insurance Program. So the NFIP, what it does is if you are in an NFI community, you can buy federally backed flood insurance. Nye County, in my last research, is an NFIP member. And so what it allows you to do is, so you can buy federally backed flood insurance. I couldn't find any other counties that were NFIP members. And there's also something called CRS. Now, the good news about mitigation planning is that it gives you a leg up when you are applying for CRS. CRS is a federally backed program where you start getting discounts on flood insurance. So if you join the CRS, the community rating system, then if you're a CRS community and your people are buying federally backed flood insurance, they'll start getting a discount. So it's one of those programs that having a mitigation plan helps you achieve. Here's our flood risk. You'll see that our flood risk is kind of in that pinkish level, which indicates that it's higher. And here are our expected annual losses. Again, this gets a little bit more orange, so we expect a few more expected annual losses. Severe thunderstorm. Why are they included? It's an interesting thing. You guys, as far as I can see, didn't have a lot of hail. Right? And we're going to talk about the occurrences of hail. But you guys do have a lot of wind, as is evidenced by today. And it's interesting because this is severe thunderstorms. Here we go. This is a wind map. So these are wind zone maps. And you'll see that you guys are in zone 1, right? But if you look real closely there, you'll see that there's that kind of squiggly line area. And that indicates that you are in a special wind region. And a special wind region means that you have a higher incidence of high wind. And that makes absolute sense. All we got to do is walk outside today. And, if I had hair, I'd be worried about how it looks. So we're absolutely going to talk about those winds and what they can do. And lightning as well, because my research, again, my initial research indicates that you've had a lightning death in the county. In fact, you may have had 2 lightning deaths from talking to Scott, you may have had 2 reported lightning deaths in the county. So this is the risk. And what we do is we break severe thunderstorms out into those 3 categories. So this is your hail risk. You'll see that it is very low. But if we go to lightning, you'll see that that's actually a moderate risk. And if we go to strong wind, you'll see that that's very low. I disagree with that, right? I think you probably disagree with that. And that's absolutely why we're including this in the plan, because while they say you've got a very low risk to strong wind, I say, I don't think so. And again, FEMA is not the end all be all, no offense to FEMA, of knowledge or information. We rely on the local sources. We rely on people being outside and saying, hey, that wind's howling at 50 miles per hour today. Tell me we don't have wind. Okay. We can look at the expected annual losses. Now, again, for all of these, it's going to be pretty low. But we're going to put it in there. And then finally, I'd like to put in wildfire. Now, again, because this is such a big county, you have such a difference in vegetation. And there is a very big possibility of wildfires, especially coupled with drought and especially coupled with the strong winds, right? Those are drivers of wildfires. So we absolutely want to include this in the plan. And you can see that, again, the majority of Nye County is owned or operated by the federal government. And so we look at BLM statistics, the Bureau of Land Management statistics for this, and you'll see that you guys have had a lot of events over the past, 22 years? More. You've had a lot of events, and you can see the classes there from A to G. You've had some pretty big G events and a lot of acres burned. So we absolutely want to include wildfire. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah, that does say Curry County. I apologize. That's a misprint on mine. I'm working on another hazard mitigation plan. I'm doing them both concurrently. And so I probably was writing and just thinking, if it's Tuesday, I must be in. So my apology about that. The burning bush of Turin. Is it an oracle? Does it tell us? Oh. Yep. It's an interesting thing. You know, one of the big drivers of wildfire, especially on the side of interstates where it's dry in this region, is when people's they have car trouble and their cars are running hot and they pull over and they light the bush on fire underneath the car, right? It happens for weird reasons. Okay, so this is a map of those wildfires. So you can see that they've mapped it out as to where they occurred. And it's a pretty good spread around the county, although there is a very big preponderance in the southeast corner. There's a lot more reported there. But again, as we go up to the northeast corner, again, same thing. We start getting a little bit more, and also the northwest corner. And again, I think that has to do with fuel type. What's available to burn up there? Yeah, so canyons up there for sure. Okay, here's your wildlife risk index. Again, they say that it's fairly low. I kind of disagree with that a little bit for the enumerated reasons. They also say, fortunately, that your expected annual losses tend to be a little bit low as well. So that's good. And the reason for that is because if a wildfire is burning, but there's nothing to burn down, aside from losing the natural resources, you're not losing a lot of property and lives, which is a very, very good. Yep. Yep. So everybody who was listening, I apologize. I should have handed Scott the microphone. We were talking about WUI, which is the Wildland Urban Interface. And that is where population is putting up against potential burn areas. And we do have some communities down here that were especially concerned about that. Okay, now for the fun part. Why are we excluding some of those hazards? Why are we excluding them? The first one is avalanche. And the reason I considered excluding it, and again, this is open for discussion, is because I couldn't find any records of any damaging avalanches in Nye County. Now, in adjacent counties, absolutely. If you're up in Reno right now, you're a little bit worried about avalanches, to be sure. But for Nye County, I couldn't find anything. And again, keep this in mind with this lens. The idea is that if you were applying for grant funding to make your community safer and someone handed you a bag of money, would you spend it on avalanche mitigation? And I think that for most of our participating communities, the answer is no. No, we wouldn't. Yes, sir.
Question to local individuals is, are there any avalanche prone areas that would have cascading effects within Nye County? Like, so with if it hit any kind of infrastructure or whatever, that would damage anything within Nye County? Is that those? No? Okay.
Yeah.
I think even the Spring Mountains just had their first avalanche since like 1980 something. It's
Okay, so I think we're all okay with excluding avalanche. Let's talk about expansive soils. Expansive soils deal with shrink swell clay soils. Okay, so one of the things we looked at is from the USGS swelling clay map. And Nye County does not have a lot of high swell clays. It's not a real clay environment. Now, we did find one incidence of swelling soil, expansive soil damage, and that was here in Pahrump. And that was they built some houses. They didn't do their geology report, maybe right, and they had some damage to those houses. Now, that has been mitigated against because Nye Commission passed a bill in October 2006 requiring soil disclosure to buyers. So the question I would ask is this a hazard that we're worried about? Is this a hazard that we're thinking, hey, we're having problems with? I think the answer is no. Some of you are saying yes. So the question would be, if we're concerned about this as a hazard, what are we going to do about it?
Scott Lewis, before the passing of this bill, there's been commercial and educational buildings and residential environments that have been built that are still experiencing damage from this type of situation. So I think it's something that we just need to keep in the back of our minds, keep in our back pocket. But I think the bill in itself is educated potential buyers and builders as to what steps to take to help ensure that it doesn't occur. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't still occur within the county.
Yes, Caroline Logue. And my comment to follow Chief Lewis is that there needs to be a greater amount of actual verbal disclosure on these things. The realtors are required to have it in writing, but I've talked to many residents that purchased here and they were never told. And of course, to read through all those real estate documents is a hazard in itself.
One of the things that we need to discuss then is we can include this in. So we can put this in and say, all right, this is an identified hazard. But then what we need to do is identify at least 2 actions per impacted jurisdiction that says if someone handed our community a bag of money, what would we do to mitigate against expansive soils? And the one idea I have, you guys already did, which is pass a bill that says we've got to do soil disclosure. FEMA can tell us better, but I don't think that they're going to give money to go back and retroactively do foundations on individual homeowner houses.
So I'm Ryan Gershwin with State of Nevada, Division of Emergency Management. They may, depending on the extensiveness and the loss of and the repetitive loss, they may do a relocation of the building. So like repetitive loss for flooding, right? But land subsidence isn't necessarily a repetitive loss thing. So it would depend on the BCA, the benefit cost analysis, on what the level of risk to the said buildings are, and whether that would be worth a dollar amount, relocating those buildings, doing something to fortify those foundations, things of that nature. And if they are very important public buildings or things of that nature, then it may be something that would be worth just throwing in there, right? And if something happened, if it's a public building that the community uses, say, okay, this is a potential issue. And if this ever happens, then we would need that public building built somewhere else in an area. And then you would be covered with that, right? So if there's the slightest issue, and if it's of any importance at all, I would recommend to throw it in there.
Hi, Erica. What do you got for us?
So I was going to say, I thought, and you guys let me know if I'm wrong here, that we Developers have to do soil testing anyway. And most of Beatty is in a flood zone. So I think that's this soil. I don't know if we have expansive soil, shrinking soil, but I think it's a really important to include.
Okay, so again, expansive soil is clay-based soil that swells up and either dislodges or moves or cracks existing foundations in general. It does other stuff too. You're worried about expansive soil too, potentially with infrastructure. So if you've got a lot of underground pipelines or a lot of underground utility lines, again, that can be a concern as well. We can certainly look at this further. It sounds like, we're sort of 50-50 as to whether we want to put it in here again. One of the things that that we were talking about is, hey, look, if we put it in there, we can put on there that we want to move public buildings and construct public buildings. To move a public building or to reconstruct a public building is $5 million, maybe more, right? And so again, one of the things that we would have to look at is if we say we're going to do something for $5 million, back of the envelope math on that is we got to come up with $1.25 million, right? Right. So again, there's a concern with that. But again, I'll look at the data further on this and we can kind of see, and then we'll circle back. I'll work with you guys and say, do we want to put this in there? Is there something we're concerned about? Easy to put in, but we got to, when we put it in there, one of the things that we have to do as jurisdictions is think, okay, what are we going to do to mitigate against expansive soils? How are we going to mitigate against it? The number one thing that always pops to mind, you guys have already done. The second thing that someone mentioned was, Eric, I think you mentioned is, or I'm sorry, I forget who mentioned it, was builders have to do soil tests in order to build the foundation. It's one of the things that's required, right? And so they should be doing building tests. They should be doing soil tests already to determine the needs of those foundations.
This is Albert Camerata. I'm going to elaborate on that. The soils test requirement is only required in the Pahrump region planning. Outside of the planning district, there's no requirement. So as a builder, you're supposed to build for the building codes, but nobody here knows that outside of our.
So we'll put this one in the solid maybe category. We'll absolutely put it in the solid maybe category. But one of the things that I'll need you to do is, if we put it in the plan, when we're talking about generating those mitigation action items, we need to think about, okay, we've said it's a concern. How are we going to make it better? What are we going to do to make it better and make the community safer? So that's one of the things that we'll have to do. Okay, let's talk about. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, we have a problem in Pahrump. We have, again, washes that hit our community center on Basin 160 a lot. And it's a flood zone, and that building is no longer going to be used for our community center per se. We're going to build a $10 million one on Gamebird. And that has to be looked at, huh, Scott? The fine tooth comb, you're going to throw 10 million for a convention center and all that? Well, we'll take care of that as a citizen, taxpayer, and voter in this.
Okay, let's talk about ground or land subsidence. So ground or land subsidence is sinkhole, collapses of ground. Now, one of the things that I looked at is we looked at karst topography. Karst topography is soils. They tend to be sort of limey, limestoney kind of soils that can evaporate with a lot of water under them. And so you get these sinkholes. You'll see that there's all sorts of regions of karst topography throughout the United States. Nye County really isn't one of them. And one of the things we looked at again was, could I find any evidence or any reporting at all of any kind of ground failure or ground subsidence event? And I couldn't. And so this is one of the things. Now, we also know that Nye County is known for its mining, right? Subsurface mining. And so we looked at that and we said, yes, there's lots of mine areas, especially up in Tonopah. but we couldn't find any incidents, any historical incidents over, as far as I could look back, of there ever being a ground subsidence event. And so one of the things that we talked about was, and I keep hitting this theme and I apologize for it, but if someone handed your community a bag of money and said, make your community safer, would you mitigate against subsidence? And I think the answer may be no. Now, again, I am open for discussion on this, absolutely, but I couldn't find any history of it. Now, past performance does not, indicate or guarantee future performance. Just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean that it won't. But there's all sorts of hazards like that, right? Just because we haven't been hit by a meteor doesn't mean we're not going to be. There's not much I can do about that. So again, these are the things that we want to think about. We don't have to come up with answers now as to whether we want to put them in or not. We're pushing forward with writing the plan, but we want to take this under consideration. Okay, landslide. Landslide's a little bit of a controversial one. Again, based on my research, my initial research, I couldn't find any indication of a damaging landslide event. I just couldn't. Doesn't mean they don't occur, but the thing we want to keep in mind is a lot of our areas where we have potential slide areas are unpopulated. And so it can slide all at once too because it's not impacting anybody. When we're looking at events like this, we want to look, does it impact infrastructure? Does it impact where people live? Again, I couldn't find anything. Yes, sir.
Include when we have flash floods, area that comes down the rocks and the things, because we have a lot of loose rock surface. Is that included in flood or is that included in landslide?
Technically not really a landslide. But again, one of the things we also want to keep in mind when we're looking at all these hazards is, concurrent hazards. What occurs together? Like an earthquake is going to occur and it may cause other stuff. A flood is going to occur and it may cause other stuff. And so we don't look at these all in a vacuum or siloed. We look at them all in conjunction. Okay. Tornadoes. Why did we exclude tornadoes? Again, based on my research, I found 2 incidences of tornadoes in Nye County over the past 20 years, and they were both EF0, the lowest rated tornadoes on the scale. We found no indication of any damages, deaths, or injuries from those tornadoes. You guys in general aren't tornado country, right? You're just not. And it's a good thing. We're wind country for sure, but not tornado country. Okay. Tsunami Seiche. A tsunami, until California drops off into the sea, we're not so worried about. A seiche is a very big wave in a large lake. So again, a seiche is something you're concerned about if there is, let's say, an earthquake. A big shift in the ground can cause a very big uplift in a lake. I don't think that's a concern for Nye. The Loch Ness Monster, we can mitigate against. Okay, and then finally, volcano. Why did we exclude volcano? Because there's not one, right? And volcano is a very long-term hazard. I think, there's talk about the Yellowstone volcano, that big uplift area, and it's going to eventually kill us all, but I'll be dead by then anyway, so it'll be okay. I couldn't find any geologically recorded damaging recent events in Nye County. And so again, if someone handed your community a bag of money and said, go make things safer, would you mitigate against volcanoes? I think probably not. Yeah, I mean, there's, there are concerns for sure, but, we want to make the communities safer for the long term, the long haul. And I think that, again, we have to have that discussion of resources and capability. And what I want to do with this plan is I want to make this plan very useful for you guys, because we don't want to say, hey, you know what, we've got unlimited funding and unlimited capabilities. So yeah, we're going to apply for all this grant funding and we're going to mitigate against volcanoes and we're going to mitigate against landslides. We're going to mitigate against avalanches, because there's just not that much money. What I want to do is I want to write you guys a pinpoint plan that says, if for any reason we get available funding, this is where it should go to. This is what makes the most sense for us as a community and is going to give us the biggest bang for the buck as a community. And so when I look at all those hazards that we excluded, I think to myself, I always do ask that question, just like I ask you. someone handed me a bag of money and said, go make Nye County safer, where would I spend it? What would I spend it on? The hazards I enumerated are the areas that, from my knee-jerk reaction, I said, that's probably where I would spend that money. The hazards that I excluded, and again, this is not all about me. This is just my initial research. This is a team effort. The hazards that I excluded, I thought to myself, I don't know if I'd spend money to make my community safer on those hazards. One, I'm not sure what I would do to make it safer. And two, I don't think it's the biggest bang for our buck, recognizing that we all have limited resources. Okay, let me take you home and get you out of here. So what are our next steps? We're in the kickoff meeting today. That's what we're doing. We're going to do our plan drafting. So I'm going to go away from this meeting and I'm going to start writing your plan. I'm going to ask you for some feedback, though, on how and what to put in the. We're going to do a review of the action. Once we've solidified those hazards, what I'm going to do is I'm going to present to you a couple of things. The first one is I'm going to present to you the action items from your old plan. And I'm going to say two things. One, did you do them? And two, if you didn't do them, is it still something you'd like to consider doing? And if the answer is yes, then we keep those actions in the plan. And then three, after that step, I'm going to say, are there any other actions you'd like to consider? Right? Is there something that you'd like to consider aside from these? You know, you look at flooding and you say, okay, we've got some things for flooding, but maybe we'd like to do this as well. And so we want to put those actions in the plan. Again, guiding the community as to what we want to do if we get money to make the community. We are going to do a final planning mitigation meeting where we all come back together. And before that meeting, we do a 2-week public review period where I actually take our draft plan and we put it online so you all can read it. Now, again, this whole process, you can see anything, anytime. There's nothing secretive or proprietary or, I don't want you to see about anything that I'm doing. So if you ever want to see something on the plan, you ever want to talk about something in the plan, I am genuinely happy to do so. But we give that 2-week comment period. We're going to open up again that online questionnaire that folks can go on to and answer. And then we're going to submit the plan to the state and they're going to review it. Now, this is no knock against the state, but I don't know if I've ever submitted a plan that the state hasn't said, hey, we'd like a few changes. And me being a reasonable guy, I say, yeah. And usually they're good changes. Usually it's like, hey, we'd like to add this in there because we think it's, and I'm more than happy to do so. And, I look at this as a collaborative relationship, not only between us, but between us and the state. And so we go in, we submit the plan, we make the tweaks, we make the changes, and then we submit it to FEMA. Now, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, will review the plan. FEMA looks at it as their job to find fault. No knock against them, but they do. I have never submitted a plan that FEMA hasn't had at least one minor comment. Now, usually the good news is this. FEMA kicks it back and they've got minor comments like, hey, we'd like to change this to this. And of course, being collaborative, we say, sure, of course we'll do it. They usually give it back to us and they will give us what they call a 72-hour technical assistance period, which is they give it back to us and they say, if you can make these changes within 3 or 4 days, send it back to us, we'll approve it, right? Which we always do. And then we're done. You have a 5-year plan that is valid for those 5 years. The final step is this, the adoption. For those of you that are either incorporated cities or cities with governing bodies, need to adopt. Because if you don't adopt the plan, then you don't have any access to any of the potential funding. The adoption step is very, very easy. It can be adopted by proclamation or resolution. It's not hard, but it's the final step that has to be done. So that's what our schedule is. Those are our next steps. And now it's the time for questions.
Lewis, could you expound on the timeline in which we anticipate being able to adopt and get to that last part of the process?
So the timeline is 3 months, 4 months, right? We're going to do it pretty quickly because one of the things we want to do and one of the things we recognize is that your old plan is expired, right? You are no longer covered. You no longer have access to those funding streams. And so as a company decided, hey, this is important. We're going to streamline the process as much as we can. We're going to throw as much as our resources at it so that it gets done quickly. I've got my GIS people working now on all sorts of maps. I've been hitting up Scott and Patrick for data already saying, hey, look, we need, where your critical facilities are. We're going to talk to our tribal partners and say, hey, we need to talk about your sacred sites, because one of the things we're very concerned about is potential hazard impacts on sacred sites. So we've already started generating this data. We've already started pushing forward. The goal is to have it to the state to review in, 3 or 4 months. That's what we'd like to do, because we recognize that right now you don't have that coverage, and we want to get it back to you as fast as we possibly can. So one of the things we'll ask is, hey, you know what? We're going to ask you for some data. If you can get it back to us as quick as possible, we'd really, really enjoy that. Yes, sir.
Erica Gerling from Beatty has her hand raised.
Hey, Erica, I'm sorry. I can't see the whole screen. So how can I help you?
Okay, so keep this in mind on the timeline that we have to have public meetings, agendize, all that kind of thing. So if we wanted to have a workshop to, gather input from the community, that's something we have to have an agenda for. And then the board has to decide, and then the commissioners, ultimately, we decide, but we're under the commissioners. They would approve ultimately, because we're an advisory board. But it takes time to get all those things done. So I think 3 or 4 months, that might be, I don't know if we could do it, but we will try our very best.
Yeah, absolutely. And if that timeline, Erica, doesn't work, we of course can expand upon it. One of the things is that we'll start asking you for data, and we'll start giving you sections of the plan to review, and we hope that you will review it. We'll ask you about events and things like that. So we understand that sometimes things move a little bit slower, sometimes things move a little bit faster, and we're happy to accommodate that. We've just set an aggressive goal because one of our worries is that you guys right now don't have the hazard mitigation plan covered, and that worries us a little.
Okay.
This is Patrick Lasby from Emergency Management again. I also just wanted to add on that. I'm sorry, Erica, were you, go ahead.
Yes, I'm finished. Thank you.
That's part of why when I sent out the invitations, I sent them to all the chairs of the town boards, the chairs of the county commission, the chairs of the advisory board, so that everybody's involved with this, so that we can make it as smooth and as quick as possible.
Yeah, Eric, and one of the things on that is one of the real easiest things is we'll ask for that initial data, but then we'll write big sections of the plan and we'll provide them to you as hazard mitigation planning committee members. We'll provide those to you and have you do a review of them. And then at that point, it's a heck of a lot easier to actually look at something and sort of redline and QA, QC something, as opposed to sort of coming up stuff from thin air type of thing. So the goal is to provide you with documents to take a look at.
Not a town-to-town approval process and then comes to the county. It is a county approval process with input from the respective towns, which changes the dynamics. Those that are interested in participating, their information and their opinions are greatly valued, but it doesn't have to be approved by a town to town to town and then the county.
Hi, thank you, Caroline Logue. I would like to also comment on the fact that we did have a county commissioner here present who chose to step out. And that's regretful because so much is dependent upon the county commissioners here, since we have only the 5-member county commission representing us here in Pahrump. And without their support in doing all of this, it makes it, as the lady mentioned, almost impossible to accomplish.
Hey, I just wanted, this is Commissioner Ron Boscovich. I don't know if she was referring to me, but I'm still here present.
Ron, we're happy to have you on board.
Thanks.
And I apologize. I stepped out to get some water, so I wasn't very long.
And Ryan Gershman from the state. So as far as the formal adoption process, that's up to you to Nye County on how they want to do that. You can either submit it to FEMA and submit it to the state, submit it to FEMA, and then get approval by FEMA, and then have it adopted by the county commission. And then you submit something back to FEMA, and then you get that actual checkbox done. Or you can wait for the process within, if you're not able to get it on the docket, county commission within the timeline you're looking for, you can still submit to FEMA. And so it's up to you. There's some flexibility in that on how you want to do it.
Sorry, Scott Lewis. So Patrick and I were just talking. I think it's very important for people to realize why the expiration even occurred. So Patrick's just going to jump on that real quick.
I just wanted to point out that we got the grant back in, actually before Scott or I were even in position, and we sent it out for bid twice, got absolutely no replies on the bids. And we looked at Scott and I updating it ourselves, which that can't be a part-time job. Has to be somebody concentrated on this full-time. And I actually got a call from Sama at BOLDplanning wanting to talk to me about our COOP plan, our continuity of operations. And I said, well, we're good on that. However, how are you guys on hazard mitigation plan? And that's what got this ball rolling. And I am very excited to get this going. COVID,
of course, is always a Yep. Okay, let's take I'm sorry, who have you got on the computer? How can I help?
I have Nicole with her hand raised, and then Erica Gerling.
Nicole, how can we help?
So just two questions. We've talked about grants a little bit, and I know that the town of Round Mountain has struggled a little bit because of the income that our town has. And so I was wondering if income is part of that grant. Like, will we not be able to apply?
No, so the answer on that is no. There's no monetary cap on what the town income has to be to apply for grant funding. Just keeping in mind that in general, you have to come up with that 25% match. There's nothing saying where that 25% match can come in. It can be from, an angel investor type of thing. There's nothing that says where that 25% match has to come from, but there is no income limiter either.
Okay, cool. And then the other thing I was going to ask is, you guys had the list of participants on the board, right? Name, title, whatever. So if we want to be a part of that team, who do we need to contact?
Yep. So just talk to Patrick. Just send an email to Patrick if you'd like to be a representative of your jurisdiction on the Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee. Just send an email or just reach out to Pat, and he will put you on the team, and we'll put you on the team.
I'm sorry. This is.
Yep. And then we'll get a copy out to everybody.
And this is Patrick Lasme again. I sent out invitation letters to all the town board chairs, the elected town board chairs, and the advisory board town chairs. And so you guys are automatically invited to participate. Please feel free to send me an email, say, yes, I will be in attendance. Also to all the bordering county emergency managers and yes. Absolutely. Will be DP, it's Delta Papa, Lazenby, LAZ is in zebra, E is in echo, N is in November, B is in boy, Y is in Yankee, at Nye County NV altogether.gov.
Thank you.
I didn't. You know what? I may have some out in my truck actually.
One of the things that we were just talking about, Ryan was talking about from the state. He's talking about when we get to our eventual adoption process. Once we've got the plan, and there's two ways that we can do this. The first one is that we as communities adopt the plan and then submit it to FEMA, and then FEMA does their review, and then we make the changes, and then we're all good. The path that I usually recommend we take is this. We don't adopt the plan, which we can do, and we submit it to FEMA for review and approval. And then FEMA approves it, and they give us something called approved pending adoption status, which means that the plan is approved. Now you have to adopt it. That is the easier way to do it, because depending on what your town board or your county council or whatever it may be, they may be a little bit soft about identifying a plan that actually hasn't been approved. They probably will feel a lot better about adopting a plan that has FEMA approval and is green lighted and ready to go. And so usually that's the way that we go. The only difference in that, and that actually may be changing, is for our tribal partners. Tribal partners, when they submit a standalone hazard mitigation plan, actually have to adopt the plan before they submit it. But because our tribal partners are going to be part of this county plan, they can actually adopt, and I'm going to check on this to make 100% sure, but historically they could adopt after the approval by FEMA. And so that's always the course that I recommend is get FEMA's approval, get the plan proved, buttoned up, done, and then adopt it. And because we do it that way, it actually, Erica, to your point, gives some of our jurisdictions more time to do so. We're not under a time pressure for you to adopt saying, hey, we're ready, we want to submit it. We've submitted it, we're approved, we're going to give it back to you, and you can get it on your dockets and your schedules and adopt it when you can. And I think that that is the most sensible method for us to take. Of course, I'm open for discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there one more person with a question?
Erica has her hand raised again.
Erica, how can we help?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, do you think it's the right thing to do? We should have a public community workshop. No decisions get made at a workshop, just everybody saying what their concerns are and what we could do about them.
Yeah, Erica. So one of the things that we're going to do again is we're going to push out that community survey. And one of the things that we do on the community survey is we identify the hazards that we're concerned about, and we ask our community members to rank them. We ask them to tell us about things that have happened and impacted them. And then we also ask them, hey, you know what are your ideas for making the community safer? So really, instead of doing those community meetings, what we do is we push out this so that we don't have that maybe sort of hodgepodge event where people are, talking ideas, but mainly they're kind of not liking each other's ideas. What we do is we give them a forum where they can kind of say, this is what concerns me. This is what I think the hazard should be. And this is what I think we should do about that. And that gives us really great feedback. And quite honestly, it gives us a bigger swath of the community because they can do it on their mobile phone. They can do it on a laptop, a tablet, a computer. You can have kids at school do it. So one of the things we like to do is, have high school students or people do it because young people look at it different things than old people like me, right? Like they see things differently and they notice different things. So if we get the kids involved and have them fill out the survey, it does give us this wide swath of the community. And really, we've had great success with this because they can put some unfiltered comments in there and there's some really interesting things sometimes, but it does give you a really good window into the community. And so, Erica, that's usually what we do in lieu of those public meetings. If that doesn't work for you, you can absolutely tell us, but we found that we've had great success with that.
I mean, you wouldn't have to attend the meeting. That's something we could do on our own, but we'll all have to think about it and talk to our girl in the office and some other members. And also I wanted to ask that when you get to this final review stage, can you come in person and do a presentation?
Erica, all the options are all on the table. But the other thing too to consider is that even when you have your meetings, if you want someone to participate at this level, we can be done by teleconference, video conference, things like that to address any questions that you may have. But the approval process, I wouldn't get too far ahead at this point. But we really need to get the basics started and start getting that paper, and so we can provide Matt all the information he needs.
Got it. Thank you.
Hey, Matt, I just had one question / comment. When we found that we have a lot of people in this area who don't have or won't get internet access, can I get a PDF copy and I'll distribute it as much as I can that way as well?
Absolutely. We can print out the questionnaire. We can put it at
Carolyn Allen has her hand raised on the Zoom meeting. Go ahead, Carolyn. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you had the mic there.
Yeah, first of all, this is Caroline Logue. I'd like to apologize to Commissioner Carbone because I saw you leave, but I didn't see you return. And I appreciate the fact that you're here.
We have another commissioner on the line as well.
And that is important. I would like to ask if the Nuclear Waste and Environment Advisory Board is still in effect and why they cannot be included in some of the process and procedure that needs to be accomplished.
So that's a great question. One of the things that FEMA is, one of the unusual things about this plan is that this is actually a natural hazard mitigation plan. So it's not man-made hazard. Now we can include them in there, but when FEMA and when the state are doing their review, they in general don't really look at those man-made hazards because it's not written under consideration for that. So the man-made hazards don't have to go in there. And really there's not, because this is a natural hazard mitigation plan, we tend not to put them in there. If we're looking at man-made hazards, we have to, if you look at the low-level waste site, right? Again, one of the things that we'd have to consider is if we identify it as a hazard, what are we going to do about it? Right? What do we as a community do about it? And most of that stuff is completely and utterly out of our control. If there's, Scott and I were talking about this a little bit. If there's a hazardous materials accident relating to any of that kind of stuff, the cleanup is done by a federal team, not by us. Now we may have a response effort in that, but that's the majority of the federal team. And those man-made hazards get really, really complicated to do because you have to start looking at like commodities flow studies and things like that to actually have an understanding of the flat amount of stuff that's going through, right? You have to have a baseline understanding of that to understand risk. And that gets really complicated. So in general, these tend to be natural hazard mitigation plans. That's what we write them as. We do recognize that there's other man-made hazards out there. Absolutely. We're not saying that they don't exist, but for purposes of this plan, they tend to be natural hazards.
Very forthright with the question.
This advisory board does handle environment as well. And climate change is one of the big issues that we can't really foretell what's going to happen in the future. But I appreciate the fact we're going to be prepared.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the talk about climate change. One of the new requirements, FEMA has revised their requirements for the plan. And there's two new big requirements in there. The first one is climate change. So we have to look at and try to determine what the potential impacts of climate change will be on these hazards. So each section, each identified hazard has a discussion of climate change and what the impact may be. So earthquake, climate change isn't going to do much to it, right? The earth moves, that's what happens. Drought, absolutely. Thunderstorms and rains, absolutely, right? There'll be impacts from those. Extreme heat, again. And so we look at the potential impacts. The second thing that FEMA has asked and changed is planning equity. That's inclusion of, diverse groups of people. And when we sent out the invitation for this, I think you'll all notice that we said, please come. We want a diverse group of people to attend these meetings, right? We did the outreach, we tried. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But again, those are new planning requirements for FEMA, and we take those very seriously. I think we had a question on the line.
Well, Nicole had her hand up. She has her hand back up now. Nicole, do you want to go ahead? And then Perry had a question on the telephone.
Yeah, I
Hi,
just
Nicole.
wanted, sorry guys. I just wanted to ask how the tailings dam at Round Mountain isn't considered man-made.
It is. It's Nicole, that's a fantastic question. It is unusual in that dams and levees are actually considered a natural hazard by FEMA. Now they're not, but they are. It's the one man-made hazard that is included in plans. That's the one, and I'm not quite sure why it's considered a natural hazard, but it is. So that you make a fantastic point. And did that answer your question?
Yeah, you did. Thanks.
Okay. And I think we had another question, Patrick.
Perry on the telephone from Beatty, did you have a question?
Actually, I got three of them. First question is, it was mentioned earlier that grant monies are available for federally declared disasters. Are federal monies available if there's a Nevada or county declared emergency or disaster?
There is grant funding available for that too. So there are other streams of funding again, and I didn't dive into them, but yes, there are. Yep. There's a threshold minimum there, but yes, there are other streams of funding available for those who have approved hazard mitigation plans. So yes.
Okay. The following two questions are going to be a little bit involved, so bear with me.
Okay.
Any disaster is not a matter of if. Disasters are definitely going to happen, just a matter of when, where, and types. Considering this and having only one hospital in Nye County, is there a possibility of having a portable medical hospital or facility like the military has that can be brought to either federal or state declared disaster areas, with a strong possibility of having large numbers of injured people? This would be a major concern. With the distances involved to advance medical care, distance equates to time. And as we all know, medically speaking, time has been and will be critical to those injuries.
Harry, this is Scott Lewis. Thank you for your question. So in the event of a disaster that required additional medical resources, that is built into several different plans, including our interactions with state emergency management, where let's say there's not even injuries, but there's fatalities. There are plans in places and resources available to us that can be started through resource requests very quickly. And so that's where that consideration would be underway. It's part of a planning process, but it's more of like a strategy and tactics portion of it. And
So
Perry,
if
I
we
believe
was
you
to
have one
have
more
a-
question. I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
As a follow-up to Scott's response here, so if we had a major situation, which our biggest concern would be flooding, with the motels north of the bridge downtown and stuff, people are going to get hurt and killed. So if we had a big major flood, well, I guess I'm going into question 3 right now. So there would be possible military, like helicopters and whatnot, medevacs and whatnot available too. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So that's our back pocket list. So when such emergencies occur like that, we bring out our resource requests. We also utilize our back pocket list, as I mentioned, and we start getting the appropriate level of resources that are available to us, whether they're federal, state, regional, or county. Even and then again, paramount is the local resources. They're going to be the immediate responders. They're going to start dictating the needs. Based upon the needs, are going to drive those resource requests. Everything we're talking about right now is built on a timeline. So if it's a mass casualty event, irrelevant of what the cause is how the response methodology is going to unfold. And so would we rely on a single hospital for managing all those different patients? Absolutely not. That's where we come in with the secondary plans on which hospitals are the closest, which ones are the most appropriate, whether they're trauma centers, burn centers, cardiacs, whatever the nature of the medical events that are unfolding as part of the overall event is going to drive our strategy and tactics. I hope that helps.
It does, and I appreciate that. I want to continue on with my last question here. With concerns of what I witnessed of flooding with an 8-foot wall of water followed by a 15-foot wall of water through the Amargosa River through downtown. We were lucky enough to have no injuries. Now that we have 2 motels upstream of the bridge downtown Beatty, which will plug up and create a massive backup of water, people in the motels will most assuredly result with being injured or killed. But the Amargosa River currently in need of an extensive cleanout because of the large number of trees, etc. How can the town of Beatty get the riverbed cleaned out? It has been said by Dave Spicer, a local contractor, the window of being able to clean out the riverbed is normally between mid-October through mid-April. It brings to question who is responsible for the cost of the cleanup and the cost resulting from the flooding.
Yeah, Perry, that I'm not sure about, but I will tell you this, is that is a very good and very solid potential mitigation action item to put in your plan is, the cleaning of debris and blockage from the river or the stream. That is absolutely a mitigation action item that you can put in there. And then upon plan approval, assuming funds are available, that's something that you can absolutely apply for. Who's responsible for it now? That one I can't tell you.
Right now, I did ask Patrick, and I'm sorry I can't pronounce his last name, with the county emergency management, Levinsky or something like that. But anyway, I asked him if he, yeah, him too. I asked him if he could find out who has overall responsibility of that riverbed. Is it like BLM or some other government organization? Whatever, I don't know. But I think if he was to find out that question of mine, it might help answer the question of what we can do through what and how,
Hey, Perry, this is Patrick Lazinski. How you doing, Boats? Hey, the best I could find out so far is that the Amargosa River is under BLM. How we get them to do that is what I'm working on now.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Patrick.
My pleasure, Boats.
That's all I got to say.
Lewis,
Huh?
I know that you county response emergency management is the initial. Do you feel there's a need for CERT to help augment in a large disaster in this county, or do we feel we have enough resources?
Great question.
You're
Thank you.
really broke.
I think one of the issues is geographically where you're standing, where this disaster occurs, because if you go further north in the more remote areas, there's not going to be the opportunity to get those resources. So it's always going to start at the most local level. And then as the incident expands, that's where the resources start expanding as well. So depending on what we can get there in a timely fashion at the appropriate level will drive our decision making. So what ends up happening, every incident that occurs within the county starts at the local level. Once the local level no longer can manage that incident, and if it's something that the county needs to become involved with from an emergency management standpoint, it's not the response, not the lights and sirens, but it's like the radar O'Reillys. It's having that list that we can go to. So let's say a town needs 5 additional ambulances. We're going to know where to get those ambulances and dispatch them and monitor to make sure that they get there safely and start managing those patients. Does that make sense?
Yes, Caroline Logue. I have a question for Chief Lewis. I've had previously, probably decades ago, discussions with him on evacuation routes and information and education to the citizens about not only what routes to take, but how to get themselves prepared. And I know states throughout the country are now asking people to have emergency preparation kits put together. so they can immediately evacuate in case of a hazard. So though that kind of education, I think, would be a great resource to develop if it's not already in place.
Scott Lewis, and that is an interesting question and point because there are only so many roads that lead out of any given town in the county. And so, well, no, and that's the point. So if they're impassable, it's a shelter in place issue. If they are passable or there's diversion routes, that's what we have to do. And so I think you're absolutely right. One of our big key components is the appropriate communication, which the county has been helping us with. But the consistency of submitting and sending that communication information from here to, for example, Gabbs or Current Creek is over multiple different communication sites. And that's where some of our challenges lie. And we work diligently with IT to try to bridge those to make a more meaningful communication gap mitigation, because is really what it is. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the comms are most important here in this 18,000 square foot county, you know? And I was trying to figure out how you are going to get this contract from the county. You get paid from county when you get this contract approved?
Get paid. This is grant.
Okay,
Grant funded project.
for the whole process.
Yeah.
So the county and the citizen taxpayers and voters have no input as to how much green they gotta provide? That-
To us, to write the plan.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanna, I'm new here, you know, I've been here in, what, 8 years? No? But anyway, we need a bug out bag, girlfriend, in your car. Mitigating situation. That's a prepper. Thank you.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody for attending. I really do appreciate you being generous with your time, and that's what you have been, generous with your time to help us move forward with this hazard mitigation plan. We're going to do our level best to make this a usable, effective, and sensible plan for the communities in Nye County. We want to make sure that this is a plan that works for you. We're going to start writing it. We're going to start doing sections of the plan and putting things together. Again, if you ever want to see anything or talk to us about anything, you can absolutely let us know. The only thing that I ask is send all your communications through your county emergency manager, through Pat or Scott, so that they can see it and they can get it on to me, because I want them to have the full visibility as well. I have available here for the folks who are here some hazard event summary form. So and I'll make this available to Pat and Scott as well, and they can send these out electronically to people. But what this asks is, hey, what jurisdiction? What's the date if you know it? Give me an approximate date. What was the event that occurred? What was the description of the event? And what did it do? Right? Did it hurt somebody? Did it damage property? What did it do? This is our best way to figure out and identify and start dialing in hazards on a local level. Again, I can look for big picture events, absolutely, and I can even find some small picture events as well. But I'd like to hear from you as to what events you've witnessed and have happened and what they've done so that we have a reckoning of this. So I have these forms here for the folks in person, and then I'll provide them Pat and Scott, and they can send them out electronically to anybody who's on the line. We're going to start doing some research for our tribal partners. We're going to make a couple asks of you as well. We're going to want to talk about your sacred sites and the potential impacts of hazards on those. So we'll want to talk about their sacred sites and whether you want us to map them or whether you just want them to us to identify them and say that they exist and say we don't want to share the locations of these, which is a perfectly acceptable answer. For our communities, we're going to start looking at things like building codes. Do you have a master plan? Do you have any kind of community plans? How can we pull information from that? And we're really going to take a hard effort at getting big sections of this plan done so you guys can start reviewing and QA and QCing. I am always genuinely happy to talk about any of this kind of stuff, hazard mitigation, or heck, anything related to emergency response, whatever it may be. I'm happy to talk with you about that. So again, the only thing I ask is that you go through your emergency managers, your county emergency management department, just so they have full visibility on that, right? That's the only thing I ask, but you can always get to me and talk. We'll make sure that we keep you up to date as to the progress on the plan, how we're doing and what we're doing. And we'll make sure that, when that county survey, when that survey comes online for mitigation planning, once we've solidified what the hazards are, we're going to send that out to everybody. We're going to make hard copies available. So really your input makes this plan better. And that's the take home from. So again, thank you so very much for coming. We really do appreciate you spending your time with us. I'm going to give this back off to Scott to kind of take us home. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
Hi, before you
So
end.
just want to say real quick, thank you to Matt. He did a
Hello?
great presentation. I think he's placed us on a better trajectory to get this plan done. And I believe Patrick has a question online. Patrick?
Sorry, looks like Janie Bryan has a question or
Yes.
comment.
I do. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. No, I just wanted to comment and thank you for the presentation. I didn't get on till a little bit later, but I'll need to find the recording to go back. I understand this was recorded.
Yes, I'll be able to download the recording, Janie, and I will send it out and I'll have Arnold put it online and
Okay.
it'll be publicly available for everybody.
And Jenny will also get the slide presentation out as well.
Yeah, I was snipping some of that off of my screen. But yeah, that would be great. The other thing is whatever templates that you're using to gather your information for your assessments and whatnot, we would like that as well. So that we can start working on our area here. And I'm glad you brought up the sacred sites stuff and on the mapping. I think we'll look towards our Tribal Historic Preservation Office and check with them. They may already have a map on some of that stuff. And if they're willing to share, and if, like I said, yeah, we have a couple of like the public cemetery, but other than that, there may be a few other sites here. So we'll look into that. And then I think we just need a place to start so that we can put that annex together for your plan.
That sounds great. Thank you. And I think, Matt, you have another question?
Comment.
Our tribal partners, his ideas of tribal population, things like that. I will tell you that there, unfortunately, with our tribal partners, there tends to be a data gap. It's called data gap because when FEMA is doing stuff, sometimes they don't work in conjunction as well as they should with our tribal partners. So we'll very much likely come to you and ask about things like population and housing and things like that. But we'll make sure that we we give you the questions that we need you to answer, and then you can come to us for guidance.
Okay.
Thank you for your question, Janie. Yes, you
I
have some
think
follow-up?
I know I heard Rich on the call. I mean on the presentation, Rich Greshman, or Ryan Greshman. I was wondering if through this assessment, through the planning, if anybody has any ideas or resources that we could use on our flood mitigation. We really need some assistance with some engineering. We would like to start doing some work for prevention efforts, but we need engineering, I guess, assessments.
So
I
just
don't know
an
where to
answer to
go.
that. So you have a direct pathway directly to go to the state on such plans for that type of assistance. So we would encourage you to contact the state Department of Emergency Management for anything that you may need on that. And Ryan, I think wants to add a word.
Yes, hi, thanks for the question. In past cases, when local jurisdictions have had questions about this, we generally refer them to the local floodplain manager first, because they have more information on those specifics of the area. And if if that doesn't work out, then by all means, please reach out to us. And if you don't know who that is, yes, please reach out to us. And I'm sure we can include my information in whatever is sent out to everyone. And if you have any difficulties at all, please get a hold of us, and we'll most likely refer you to the state floodplain manager. And just yeah, we'll get you figured out.
One of the areas I thought of calling, one of the resources I should say, is that our what do you call it, the Natural Resources and Conservation Service. I think maybe I could look towards that too. I just thought about that yesterday. But thank you very much, guys. And we'll see you at the next meeting.
Thank you. So in conclusion, Don't see any hands in the audience. I'd like to thank the commissioners for their attendance. I thank those that are in the audience here, and we also thank everyone who's on the phone and participated in this discussion. We look forward to working with you. We're going to make this a viable, highly visible plan, and your input is tremendous and will be deeply appreciated throughout the process. If there are any questions, please contact us at Emergency Management. We'll get those answers back to you as soon as possible. With that, we'll conclude it. I'm sorry, is there a comment? Okay,
Yes,
with that, it
Perry
is 5 minutes to
Forsyth,
11.
It's this is Perry Forsyth, Beatty Town Advisory
Yes,
Board.
Perry.
I was really wanting to say thank you, not only just to the people who was facilitating this meeting, but to everybody who's here, no matter how they made the contact. And it's been very informative and very educational. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Barry, thank
And
you
this
for
is
your comments.
I'm sorry, this
Go
is
ahead, sir.
Commissioner Boskovich. I just want to echo those same sentiments as well. I appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you,
This is
Commissioner.
Erica. Thank you guys too, what Perry said.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone. With that, it is just before 11 o'clock. This meeting is concluded.
Bye.